Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I just want to talk a little bit about the progress of the fourth book. I've got a copy edit back, and I'm taking up subjects that I didn't take up in the third book, where I had discussed the fact that I was somebody that was behind other boys, and according to my biological sex, and behind, you know, gender nonconforming and what could be expected of me. I bring that up to date. I do talk about trans, and I talked about trans versus being combined with gay. I talk about what is sort of normative and what fitness means and how we should all fit into that, and talk about age verification too on the internet and a few other things like elections. And some people are alarmed about the fact I'm even talking about it when they say I haven't, I don't have a personal stake in trans people, and I haven't taken care of anybody that's gender challenged, and I don't have relationships with people like that myself, and so I shouldn't be talking about it. It would harm them if I did. And yeah, I'm very concerned about the idea now that about who gets to speak about certain things because of a group is marginalized. Let me just make this really interesting observation. When I was thrown out of William and Mary in 1961, I had told the dean that I considered myself a latent homosexual, and that was a term that was discussed in a book I had read back then. And my father said I was pinning a label on myself, like that was almost like a separate gender, a label, something that, and that meant I really wasn't a boy, and I couldn't be in a boys' dorm anymore. And that's the kind of reasoning the left is trying to use now with identity categories. And ironically, I don't think you always want to do that, because it could work against your freedom if you try to force people to be identified by what their performativities were, or their polarities were, which is something I had talked about in earlier books. So I did write the book. I am bringing my material up to date, and I have had more personal involvement with this than people think. But yeah, the patriarchal society was based on the idea that you want to reward normative behavior to keep families together, to give men enough incentive to court women and make women respect them, and stay together with one woman for a lifetime in the same bed, and actually initiate, and take care of the family for years. And that's something that was understood when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, and I sort of believed in that, and I sort of believed that people should be judged against norms and fitness and so forth. And the society was competitive, and if you were competing for grades and for fitness, and if you didn't do well, you might be more vulnerable to the draft, for example, and that kind of thing. It was a very serious thing then, which I actually believed in and sort of miss today. But the I think the whole thing, again, whether people should have to do more before they, in something area. I was quizzed on whether, my friends, whether I volunteered enough and whether I've actually related to people seriously, and rather than just cherry picking them. And yeah, I guess that's probably an issue. One of the things also to remember that's just real important is that some part of the transgender movement, part of it, particularly there's the whole issue of insisting on you can identify yourself as you like. There's the whole issue about non-binary, and they're not quite the same. But one idea that has been percolating since the Yogyakarta and some proposals back in the 90s and so forth was that people should be able to keep their birth sex secret and only be judged by their ability. It's sort of, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs kind of thinking. but that isn't an idea. But I did want to just emphasize the irony of when I was expelled, and my father said, "Well, you pinned a label on yourself. You identified yourself as something other than a man. You know, if you say you were even a latent homosexual, and you know, I had not done anything. There'd been no misconduct. I had not even there'd been no sex, no propositions. I just behaved in a way that was a little bit suspicious to some people, and people started started talking about me, and it led to my being called into the dean's office. And just by my inclinations, or what people thought was on my mind, was enough to get me thrown out of school. In other words, who I was really mattered. So in a sense, the left is ironically right about what happened to me at William and Mary. And that's just the thought I wanted to share with you tonight. Thank you for listening.